Okay, welcome to our next to last lecture or meeting or um, synchronous adventure, whatever you want to call it. I know we're missing a few people, but I'd like to get this started. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Before I do that, any questions about the last kind of assignment in module 1718? I think everyone did pretty well. So didn't see any major issues. So I'm just going to share Canvas. I don't really have a PowerPoint this time, but can you all see the Canvas environment? The final project outline. Yes, yes. All right. 1 second here. Let me get my little video panel over here. All right. I'm kind of looking away because I'm on my second screen. All right, so this is the purpose of today is to give you an idea of the final project, what I expect you to perform. These are essentially the guidelines, and you can always reference the recording of the lecture, or if you want to call it a lecture, or just the illustration of what's entailed. This is the final. Well, let me back up a little bit. If you go to your modules, you can follow along. This is the final project, module 19. Woohoo. So I'm going to start with the final project outline. I'm going to talk about the other resources and then the actual assignment, and it's 40 points. So, I mean, if you think that you don't need it or whatever. So let's go right into the outline again. All right, so basically, and well, let me do this. I know I'm jumping around. I'm going to go backwards a little bit. I'm going to talk about the actual assignment. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, you're going to create an online media rentals. Well, we're going to call it a database, but I'm just going to task you to create tables associated with this online media rentals scenario. So basically, you're going to turn yourself into a movie rental. Of course, I'll probably have to change this because, I don't know if many of you are around or have been around long enough. I mean, we did not have the level of streaming services, so you would go to the Blockbuster distribution center or whatever, and you would rent movies, and they would have a database in the background where they kept, essentially kept a record of who rented, when the movie was due, and all that. Of course, this is not truly applicable anymore. Everything is a streaming service, and that's a different type of database, but I'm not going to talk about that. Let's see what I want to do, make sure I can keep track of attendance while I'm doing this at the same time. So I'll be jumping around a little bit, but please chime in anytime, raise your hand or whatever if you have questions. All right, so the assignment, the final project will consist of these particular aspects. You're going to create tables. Now, generally, we want to think of this as you're creating the actual database, but since we have kind of a limited environment, I'm just going to task you to start with creating tables. Just think of this in your database administrator already set up kind of the framework of your database. You're just starting with the creating tables, which is usually takes the most time. So you're going to create tables, you're going to add constraints, and then you're going to create views. You're going to create sequences, You're going to add data to the tables. You're going to create indexes. You might want to reverse those. It's really, I put them in this order just to, give you the practice of figuring out what to do first, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to create synonyms from whatever object you need to, but I do want you to actually go through the process of creating synonyms, and then you're going to test the data by running several types of a DML, mostly selecting data or updating data. I'm not really going to instruct you completely, but I do want you to test the data and test the objects. You can query the data dictionary. I know this is very general, but generally, and I will give you this heads up, whenever you're creating a scenario like this, you want to run something that's like a manual process. Like if a customer goes through the registration process, although you're simulating that, you're going to be adding that information to the database. So and I'll illustrate a little bit more what I mean by that. Hold on. And this is essentially, what you're going to submit for the assignment. Basically, a bunch of screenshots of the developer, of the tables, of the data, of all the particular objects that you're creating. Now, there's several components in here that are just basically provided to you as resources. You learned about entity relationship diagram. If you click on the little link in the assignment, it'll take you to an ERD, which should, essentially follow some of the connectivity, and just to provide general information about, what you would see in an ERD, et cetera. Excuse me, I want to bring mine. Essentially the relationships across the tables. So, and you'll see here, there's tables that are a part of your database, and then, associations like star billings. And you'll see that this is kind of a higher level entity relationship diagram, and I will tell you that the specific tables will be illustrated in the resources. So essentially, this is kind of you want to reference the ERD to make sure everything, you're following all the connectivity and relationships. Also, Oracle provided, and I've streamlined this quite a bit, but it talks about DDL. You're practicing creating these objects, tables, and which includes primary keys. And if you go back to the ERD, if you're wondering, okay, how do we choose a primary key? Well, it gives you essentially the components or the attributes within those entities, like the star, or excuse me, the number sign or hashtag would be your primary key. And you see here, there's some relationships that you have to be aware of, like customers and movies, that you need to understand how they're connected. So, and so that is going to be a part of the exercise, is that I'm going to provide you with most of the queries to do this, but you will have to fill in some of the blanks here. And then there's table descriptions. I mean, you have tons of resources, and this even breaks it down to where you know exactly what the primary key is, and et cetera. So you have tons of resources that you can use to create this database scenario. And all of these tables will be a part of this assignment. And basically the deliverables are just screenshots of you creating these tables and adding the data to the tables, et cetera. You do have until the last day of class, which is March 9th, which is next Friday, not this week, but next Friday, to complete this assignment. And there's a rubric in there as well. And yes, I will be following this as far as the grading. So that's the final project, this online media rentals database. And yes, you will. There's no need to, I know you can probably go out and research to create a secondary database within our little company database, but that I'm not worried about that. You don't have to, you do not have to separate that from the tables that you have now, because these are all different tables from the employees, departments, and all that. Now, well, that's primarily what I'm looking for, because there's some specific requirements in here. Are there any initial questions on that as far as your final project? Hearing none, I will move ahead. All right, so I said I'm going to go backwards a little bit. So that's what you need to work on. You do have another document that's in here that's our Oracle, basically provided from the Oracle Academy. Essentially, the queries that you can review and use within the developer. So create table customers, movies, media, rental history, star billings, and then the sequences, and then it's essentially inserting data. Now there's one requirement, and that's not listed, that you will get from me right now. I do want you to add yourself as one of the customers. Add your, at least your name, at least. You can make up your address as far as first name, last name. You can make up your phone and address and all that, but I do want to see your name as one of the customers. So does everyone understand what I'm saying there when you're adding data? Does that make sense? There's some examples that they give you, but one of the requirements is you have to add yourself. So if you go through this document here, it has everything that you need as far as queries, but you do have to run everything and show me the query and the results. So when you're submitting your document of this Oracle online Oracle Flix, they call it, like Netflix, but I think we did change it to online media rentals, so you can throw out the whole Blockbuster reference that I had before. So now, instead of Netflix, you're now Oracle Flix. Just to let you know, to go on a little bit of a tangent, all of the streaming services are built on a database, very similar to what you're constructing here. They know your subscription, your billing, and just on and on and on. And then one thing about services like Disney Plus or Hulu or Netflix, I mean, there's some security concerns, obviously, but we're not going to concern ourselves with protecting your data. But I do want to mention that. So if you ever become a database administrator, you do have to be cognizant of how you're building this data from, and it's usually a web form that you're filling out where it's asking for particular information. And just to let you know, underneath those web forms, or whether it's Java or Python, they're running SQL to a database. So this whole scenario is simulating essentially how this would start from the very beginning and then how it continues. Obviously, services like Netflix do not have a database administrator, pulling in data from the web form or whatever, and then adding it manually to the database. But we're going to simulate that with our own kind of scenario, and that's what the project is all about. I guess the purpose, if you wanting to know, well, why are we doing something like this? Well, just in case you're put in the position where you're troubleshooting some data issues, you may be working, or you may be the database administrator that's going into that embedded code and checking the SQL itself. I've done this many instances where you will have a front end that's essentially launching a function or some type of process that where it's running. And remember, there's no magic to how data is added to a database. Somewhere underneath the umbrella of the programming, there's SQL. And I've done this many times where I've had to essentially dissect the application process itself and look at the actual SQL. And in many instances, man, many of these scenarios are, well, and if you go on the PL SQL, the programming part of Oracle, many of them are running a developer engine very similar to what you're running in our little cloud instance. So it is important to understand how SQL is still the scripting process to add data, manipulate data, and protect data, et cetera. So yes, this is another resource. Please use this. Remember, basically for the deliverable for the project, you will have to show me that you're running all these queries successfully, excuse me, within the developer or the platform that you're using. All right, and then the last document is basically kind of the framework that you can follow. Drop table, customers, movies, media, all the tables. So this is kind of an outline. Make sure you can use this document, download it, and use it, to hold your screenshots if you like. But these are all the things that you need to accomplish as far as the deliverable in the assignment. So it starts out by giving you the customers table, the movies table, the table media, table rental history, table actors, table star billing. These are all tables. And then the sequences that are going with that. And then inserting data, inserting customers, inserting movies, insert media, insert all of this you need to create or run for this project. And it seems like a lot, but it really isn't. And you have 2 weeks. You can start working on it now and just do a piece at a time every day. Yeah, I know it's not a whole lot of points. And even if you don't complete it all, I mean, I don't think it's going to hurt your grade, but once again, SQL is probably, it's the best language to learn from as long as you practice. If you stop practicing, then it becomes more difficult to really grasp, specifically what I'm trying to help you learn. So that being said, it's basically taking in all the things that I'm giving you and running all of this in the developer and recognizing that you're creating a database scenario and then submit those to that assignment. And remember, you don't have to do that this week. It's not due until it's not due until Friday, May 9th. All right. Okay, any questions about that? That's the final project. Now, I'm just going to show you one thing before I close that. Let me go back. I'm going to this query. And then I'm going to give you an idea. I'm going to go ahead and open up the developer. And you all know how to use this thing, right? You've been using it or some iteration of an Oracle SQL platform to run your queries. And so, yes, we have this schema already. That's what I'm saying. I don't think I created, I think I cleared out, I reran my, yeah. So you're going to use the ORCL schema, which is basically a database. You can't create another database, but I really don't want you to do that. It creates issues on the Oracle side. So run it off the ORCL. And basically you're going to create your little, and you notice I just copied and pasted that. I need to make sure that this query actually runs. So customer ID, which is your primary key, last name, first name, home phone, address, city, state, email. And well, someone got a little wacky on the upper and lower case, but it should matter. Oracle is case sensitive. So if you run this, now we have a customer's table, right? So I do want you to run that and then just show me that that customer table exists. And there it is, right? With all of its attributes. Customer ID, no, not nullable, and all the aspects of that object, right? Just that simple. So you can either take a screenshot of this. And you don't necessarily have to take a screenshot of the query, but it's right there. Remember, you can click on the table and it gives you it's even more information than, or you can just describe the table. That's strictly up to you, but I need to see that table exists. And so you go through, I'd take a nice little screenshot of that and just add it to this document, download this document if you want to use it, or you can use just a plain document as well. And then you would just go through the rest of these. As you see, some of the queries are here for you on this document. And most everything else is on this document. But you do have all the resources. So the whole purpose of this is to get you to actually run through the exercises and queries and perform them within SQL Developer. Now, I do need to see that these actual DDL queries and DML queries, which remember DML is actually adding data, have been run. And I'll say again, one of the customers has to be you, each individual, as you know, that's going to be one of the requirements as far as DML. So you have to insert yourself into that customer's table. And once again, you don't need to provide your real home phone and address. I'm not going to, use that to stalk you or anything. Or any of this, but your last name and first name should be there. All right. All right. So any questions about the final project? Let me check the attendance again. Anyone else show up? All right, looks good. No one's asking questions. All right. So I'll say it a third time. I need to see evidence that you're running these DDL, and DML queries, and essentially just going through all. This is your outline. This first document. This is what I'm looking for as far as the queries ran. And yes, and you should show everything within the developers using. All right. All right. Since there's no questions, this final project is due the 9th, so no big hurt. You can take a deep breath, sit back and relax a little bit, but don't procrastinate because it is a lot to do. I mean, I did this on purpose so that start right away, get some of it done, get all of it done, but depending upon what your approach is, that's fine. All right. The second thing I'd like to talk about tonight, and I'll talk about this a little more next week, which, by the way, is our party week, our end of the semester celebration. It's finals week. Ooh. But you do have a final exam in this class. I do provide you with a final study guide, which is very accurate. Final is multiple choice questions, I think, for the most part, and you can have one 8x11, or it's open book, anything but open computer, because it uses respondus lockdown. So the major emphasis is the last part of the semester. So sections or modules 9 through 16, 17 and 18 are really not needed in there because that's the whole privileges and access and all and regular expressions really aren't used that much anymore, especially with database administrators. So just 9 through 16. So please, kind of make your own study guide. Look at the quizzes each week. A lot of the questions are pulled right from the quizzes. Look at the assignments. I mean, yes, I don't do anything tricky. So, and we haven't done a lot of in-class activities, but as a matter of fact, I think next week I'll probably review a couple of things, but not this week. I want to give you a little bit of a break. But here are the topics, select statements with where and order by, etc. Make sure you download this or print it or whatever you need, but that study guide is valid. Actually updated it this is spring, this last semester, so it's the most appropriate for this, even for this iteration of the class. So I'm using pretty much the same final for the class, and I will review it specifically next week. All right, so the final itself, respondus lockdown browser, you know what that is. It will not open until May 6th, which is Tuesday, if I remember my calendar correctly. It's Tuesday, May 6th. So you will have 4 days to complete it. It opens up basically turn of the clock on Tuesday, 12 a.m. and it will close May 9th, which is our last day. It's 100 points. You have 2 hours to complete it, 2 hours to complete the 50 questions, and we'll review that again. And then you'll be done. Then you'll be very, very happy. And I do appreciate all the hard work that you've all done throughout the class. Next week, I will review a couple things. As long as you all have questions about a couple things, maybe a few of the questions in the quizzes, etc. We'll take a look at that. Remember, it's the last. It's not a total cumulative final. It's basically the last half from modules 9 or section 9. I guess I should change that. I turned it into modules from module 9, group functions, etc. Remember, module 9 was not on the midterm, so up through modules 16, which was review sequences and synonyms, fun. And I want to remind you that 17 and 18 privileges and regular expression will not be on the final. There will not be any questions on those. All right. Okie dokie. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Any Suhasini, question? Go ahead.
Yeah, after final exam, grades will be updated immediately, or will it take some days' time?
No, I like to update and publish grades right away. So you should see your grade. I usually do it that Saturday morning. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions? I did promise you a very short meeting tonight, and so if there's remember the final project, don't sweat it. I mean, it's just another, I just view it as another way for you to get some practice with SQL. So just go through it. The whole testing part of it, I do want you to actually, add data and then at the very least do a select statement on those tables to see if there's data. But what I really want, and this is not a requirement, what I really like for you to do is just think through a scenario. Someone wants to order a movie and pay for it. So how would you change the data based on that scenario? What would you do? You can map that out. You can flow chart it. You can write it out, whatever you like. And then follow that through as far as a data management scenario, like accessing that customer, figuring out what they're doing as far as fees, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I want you to do as far as testing your little Oracle Flix. Hold on a second. Oracle Flix database or Oracle Flix tables. Any questions? Last chance. And hi, Vanessa. I was kind of wrapping it up. I did promise a pretty short meeting today because illustrating the final project. Talked a little bit about the final exam. Yes, the final project is not bad. It's primarily to see how you would take, and I guarantee you, working as a database administrator for so many years, long time ago even, basically you're putting together things like the entity relationship diagram, but generally you're mapping out the queries. And in most cases, most of these platforms, that there's platforms out there that you can, import the tables. It'll build all the cardinality and relationships and then ERDs that you can use. And then just to let you know, in the old days, that's very different. We had to do all that work and documentation beforehand. But primarily, I just want you to get a sense about building this Oracle Flix database just by adding the tables and adding things like primary key and indexes, using if you need an index, et cetera, sequences, synonyms, all that fun stuff. And then it's once again another non-requirement. You have the data dictionary to rely on to make sure things like indexes and sequences are created. But the big thing is that I want you to make sure the tables are created, make sure you have screenshots of said work, and then, when you're adding data, et cetera. So, Hasini, another question.
Yeah. For a final project in lockdown browser, is there a need for us to run the queries so that do we need to access Oracle SQL Developer?
In the final exam or the final project?
Final exam in
No, you
using
don't.
lockdown browser.
Yeah, you won't be able to launch the developer anyway, just like the midterm. So it's another one of those. So the answer is no. You don't need to show that you run those in developer because you won't be able to launch that application if you're using the same computer. So it is very similar to the midterm. Most of the query questions are, well, I think I took out most of the very tricky ones, are relatively straightforward. You may run across a couple, and we're going to discuss that a little bit further next week before the exam opens. I'm going to actually take a look at all of the 50 questions and make sure that your requisite knowledge will be enough to answer the questions correctly. And for the most part, everyone did fairly well on the midterm, which is kind of the same scenario. I don't want it to be an exercise in memorization. However, yes, I know it would be best, or probably the best learning experience to be able to run the queries, but unfortunately, it's one of those things where, yeah, and that doesn't really answer your question. To answer your question, no, you will not be able to run queries in developer when you go into the final.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Any other questions? So kind of the final tidbit, that the final project is not, don't stress over it. Essentially, if I see that you're working on it when you submit it, I'm okay with you doing as much as you can, as long as they're not as long as there's not evidence that you waited until the last minute, 10 p.m. on Friday, and you tried to put all that together, because you won't have enough time. That's my fair warning. So I'm not giving you permission to procrastinate, but there's a lot to do. But you're probably thinking, for 40 points, maybe I should just create those tables. And actually, if you think about it, look through that list, it's really not that bad. Yeah. I think Vera said it wasn't so bad. So, and it really isn't. Besides, I've been working you really hard these last couple weeks. So, all right. Any questions, any comments, any concerns? I really, all of you, I really appreciate all of your hard work. I haven't had any major issues with anyone that's in the class now. So this is it, the last 2 weeks. Actually, it's less than 2 weeks now. One last lecture to kind of hash out some of the concerns for the final exam, and then that's it. And we're done. Then you can move on to another portion of your database adventures, or programming adventures, or scripting adventures. Yay. All right. As promised, I'm going to stop the recording.